This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to another edition of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, and I am your host, John Bon Jovi. Well, okay, I'm not John Bon Jovi, but imagine if I was. That would be so exceptionally cool. But speaking of Bon Jovi, today on the show from the one, the only, the mighty, and yes, I said mighty, so just, deal with it. The mighty Bon Jovi. It is guitarist Phil X. In fact, it is Canadian guitarist Phil X. He has a new album for his band Phil X and the Drills called Stupid Good Looking Things Volume 1. And on the other side of that, I have got from Jetboy, Billy Rowe, and they have a new album out called Born to Fly. Came out earlier this year. Now, the Billy interview is a couple of months old, and I'll explain why. Billy had said to me, hey man, Phil's got this album coming out. He'd love to do an interview. Let me hook you up. And he tried, and then Phil had to fly somewhere, and then they had to go to Nashville to start the Bon Jovi record, and then he had to do this. And then anyway, the interview kept not happening, and I kept saying to Billy, listen, I'm going to do this episode where I'll put you and Phil, because the Bon Jovi fans, God bless them, and I include myself in that, are rabid. They will see an interview and they'll listen and they'll share and they'll analyze. And if you're on that episode, it'll be good for Jetboy. And so here we are a couple of months later in Billy's case. But Born to Fly, it is absolutely a great rock record. So do check that out. And if the fine folks at M3 are listening, do invite Jetboy back, because they are a great band live. But let me get over to, speaking of live, by the way, recently I have seen, as you know from last week, Judas Priest in Albany, and more recently Avantasia in Montreal. The show was just packed, which is unbelievable. 2,300 seater, the M Telus. And the good thing about this thing is that they brought out Eric Martin from Mr. Big. They brought out Jeff Tate, formerly of Queensryche, Ronnie from Pretty Maids, the Bob Catley from Magnum. And it is just a spectacular show. Now, from what I saw, they're doing Montreal, they're doing Worcester, Mass., and they're flying off to Mexico. So I don't know if they're doing a lot of shows in North America, but I certainly understand now when they play the Wacken or the Wacken Festival in Germany, why 90,000 people show up and scream. Spectacular show. So if you do not know Avantasia, go check out their albums. It is, it's a little bit of everything. It's symphonic metal, it's rock. They have a song called Dying for an Angel with Klaus Meine of the Scorpions. That song, forget that Klaus is on it and thus automatically makes it cool. That song is just spectacular. So do check that out. But let's get over to, let's not do too much talk-ups today. As you can tell, my voice is on its last stand. Let us get over to Phil X from Phil X and the Drills. The album is Stupid Good Lookings, Volume 1. And, in fact, I'm going to add this. I know there's a debate out there about whether Richie Sambora should be in Bon Jovi or not. The fact is, we love Richie Sambora. I mean, who doesn't? Absolutely iconic riffs and melodies and sounds that he contributed to Bon Jovi. But if Richie can't be there, Phil is doing an absolutely bang-up job. And I got to say, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but if Richie were ever to come back, you got to keep Phil. It's got to be Richie and Phil in the band, because it would just be absolutely spectacular. And I don't know how they would want to arrange it, if they would be doing, doubling of chords, or if everybody would be, they had Bobby Bandiera and other guys on the side. Whatever it is, Phil cannot leave Bon Jovi. He is absolutely spectacular in the band, and that's no disrespect to Richie. And if Richie does come back, which, listen, between you, me, and the fence post, probably never going to happen. But if he does, you got to keep Phil. I can just imagine the power that would be of having those two guys on stage. Anyway, kudos to Richie for all he contributed to the Bon Jovi legacy, and kudos to Phil for what he is contributing to the Bon Jovi legacy. So there we go. On that, here he is, the one, the only, guitarist Phil X. We are speaking with guitarist Phil X, of course, of Phil X and the Drills, and a band that some people may have heard of, I don't know, called Bon Jovi, but the new album is called Stupid Good Lookings Volume 1. And good day, Phil, by the way. We'll start with hello.
How you doing, Mitch?
Good.
What's happening?
Not much. Doing great. You know what? I mentioned this just off air before, but I'm going to mention it again. Last night in Montreal, I saw Halestorm. I had a nice interview with Lzzy. And of course, back in 2009, you added your talent to their first album, Halestorm, their debut album.
Yes.
So let me just get a quick comment on Lzzy and stuff, just because it's fresh, and then we'll get on to the album. But isn't she one of the most terrific, forget artists, just human beings that you've ever been around? She is so incredibly nice and energetic and effervescent, and just keep going with the positive adjectives.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She truly is, and she's also a goddamn rock star. She is so like I do, Twitter Q&A every time I'm in an airport with the fans, and somebody said, "Hey, who's your favorite female vocalist?" And I don't even have to think. It's Lzzy. She's amazing.
She really is, and of course, folks who follow me know that I'm a big Alice Cooper fan and a big Toto fan, and so on that album, Tommy Henriksen and Trevor Lukather, the son of Steve, had a part in writing a song on that. Anyway, let us get...
Yeah, that's amazing.
Isn't it? Let us get to Phil X and the Drill, Stupid Good Lookings, Volume 1. First of all, you have got a collection of musicians on there that is just fantastic. Abe L'Oreal Jr., you've got Brent Fitz and Mark Torian from Bullet Boys. Talk to me about putting together this album and sort of stepping away from the Bon Jovi gig, because it's easy for you to just sit back and say, I'll just wait for John to call, we'll go do a tour, we'll go do an album, right? I mean, financially, everyth's fine.
It's not easy to say that.
Okay.
I mean, I think when you're a true artist, everybody strives to create more canvases. The Bon Jovi thing is one canvas, and then the Drills is another canvas. Obviously, I go deeper into the material with the Drills because I write all the songs. So it's an important. I think we all need form of expression. So when I get to play with the Drills and it's in front of like 200 people, they're my lyrics and the notes I chose for the melody and the stupid riffs I invent that I have to sing over, which is like doing math when I'm on stage. But then the next week I'll be in front of 60,000 people in the stadium. So it's a pretty good way to express myself.
It really is. Now, when you write songs for Phil X and the Drills, is it very specific to a certain sound and it has to be this way? Or are these songs that you think, okay, I'm going to bring them over to John and see if he wants them, and if he doesn't want them, and I don't want to suggest that they're leftovers in any way, shape, or form, because that's disrespectful, but you know what I mean? Like, do you write songs and say, I'm going to bring this to the machine, to Bon Jovi, and if they don't take it, I'll go do something with them? Or do you sit down and go, now it's time for Phil X and the Drills, and now I'm going to write for this?
Well, and I've written with other people as well, and I just know what a drill song is when it comes out. Just lyrically, melodically, guitar-wise, everything coming out of me is a drill song until I say, wait a minute, this is too left or too right. I don't think anything I write for the Drills could be submitted for another artist. I don't think anybody could deliver the lyrics that I write the way I deliver the lyrics. It's because I've always loved read between the lines, kind of tongue-in-cheek form of words coming out of my mouth, sort of. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a ribbon of just interpretation. People are like, hey, what did this line mean? And I'm like, I'd rather you figure it out. It's open to interpretation. It's that kind of lyric that I really like, as opposed to there's no there's no interpretation required in a Bon Jovi lyric. It's like black and white in your face. This is what it means. We got bills to pay.
Right, Tommy and Gina. Now, okay, so let me ask you this. It does say Volume 1, down in the bottom of the corner, and there was this understanding from what I've read in the media and stuff that Volume 2 is sort of dependent on how well this does, or so how do you measure No, okay.
No, it's nothing like that. We started recording this in 2014, and because I became a dad in 2013 and just wanted to have a lot of daddy time, and then my daughter was born in like 3 years ago. So it's been juggling the daddy thing, and when John calls and says, hey, we're doing a record, hey, we're doing a tour, hey, we're doing another tour. So everything got kind of put on the back burner, which is understandable, but at the same time I needed to get this done. And at the same time, the industry has changed so much. When you have a fan base, content is king, but not all at the same time. So by the time we were done this, we have 14 drummers on this record, but it's a bad forum these days to release an entire record with 14 drummers on it. So that's why we divided it into volumes. Like on Volume 2, we have, and this is going to come out in the fall too. This is the plan. We got Tommy Lee, we got Ray Luzier from Korn, we have Jeremy Spencer from Five Finger Death Punch, we have Liberty DeVito from Billy Joel. There's going to probably be even a Volume 3. We'll keep going. It's just a drum fest.
That's great. And of course, Jeremy has recently sort of retired from touring with Five Finger. But okay, let me ask you this.
Wait. He was actually the first drummer in the Drills.
Oh, okay. That's right. And of course,
going back to.
I was just going to say, and of course, Liberty, you did the. I'm forgetting the name of the movie all of a sudden. My mind's blanking. Hired Guns.
Hired Gun.
Correct.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You have worked a lot with American Idol artists or alumni, including Kelly Clarkson and including Daughtry and stuff. Talk to me about that a little bit. Are you sort of on American Idol's speed dial where they have a band ready, and when the artist is ready, they say, okay, we're going to... How does that work? What's sort of the connection there?
It was Howard Benson. Howard Benson fell into the and I don't mean any disrespect. He's a hotshot producer, and because he knows how to produce, man. So when we did the Daughtry record, that was the first one in 2006, I believe. That was the first American Idol artist, and we just nailed it. And then they went to him and said, hey, we need to do some Kelly Clarkson songs or an Adam Lambert tune, or there's a few other artists as well. But I'm his guy, When he needs a guitar player, he calls me. So it's nice to be in his phone book. And I'm really proud of the Daughtry record. It became a calling card. We really did something special with Chris, and that first record, I still hear it in the mall.
Yeah, and he's doing great touring all over the States and so. Okay,
it totally is.
How do you get then in Howard Benson's little black book of guys to call? Because you're a guy from Canada. You did stuff with Triumph. You toured a little bit with Al DeNova. In Canada, being Canadian myself, sometimes it's a little insular. We just sort of stay amongst each other. Ask Honeymoon Suite or Helix or Killer Dwarves about that. How did you how do you get your name in there? If somebody's listening to me now and they're, not Phil X, but they're Phil Y, and they want to have your kind of career, playing on, Alice Cooper albums and Method of Mayhem albums and Rob Zombie albums, and what was sort of the key to your success?
I think being a cool dude.
Well, I won't disagree.
I do think, well, you have to deliver. You have to be a cool dude. And you have to deliver. The first big session that I did, I moved to Los Angeles in 97, And it was in '99 that I was working on Method to Mayhem with Tommy Lee, with producer Scott Humphrey, and I was painting the garage. They were turning the garage into a drum room, and I was in there painting, and they needed guitar, and it's like, hey, Phil plays, let's get him on this. And what I tell people is, I picked up the guitar and started recording, and Tommy was like, dude, you got to play on the whole record. So if I had walked in and not delivered, I would have been back to painting and not recorded another note. So, I mean, I believe it's hard work. I believe you have to work your ass off to get to a point where your ear is super developed and you can walk in and you're very musical and you know where the chorus has to climb and come up with little bits for the verses and a cool bridge. It's about, you're almost writing, but you're not writing, obviously. You don't get like a writing credit, but your job is to make the song the best it can be as a guitar player. So that I walked in with that attitude and I could deliver. And then I think my work, it just started getting around. Like Rob Zombie walks in and says, hey, I love what you're doing on Tommy's record. Do you want to play on my next record? And then you're playing on Rob's next record, and he's like, hey, did Alice call you? I gave Alice Cooper your number last week. And then you're playing on Alice Cooper's record. And then the Howard Benson thing, it just came from, well, we know who the drummer in town is, and we know who the bass player in town is, but who's the guitar player? So they just start asking around, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 10 sources are like, you got to get this guy Phil X. And I believe that's how it happens. It's networking, and just if you deliver every time you walk into a studio with the musical ideas that everybody requires, then yes, your name is going to travel in circles. And when it hits the big circle, then you're doing good.
you're doing real good, in fact. So, quickly just talk to me about this, the famous date in April 2nd, 2013. You get a call to come to, I guess, the Saddle Dome in Calgary, and they say you got to replace. What was that like? Did you know the parts well? Because I know you had done some replacement before, but muscle memory, you lose stuff sometimes. What was that moment like where you go, oh, SHIT, I'm in. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play.
Well, it wasn't exactly like that. I mean, in 2011, I spent a lot of time learning a 2.5-hour Bon Jovi show, and then I did have to step in May of 2011 because Richie went into rehab. And then when he came out, he went back on the tour, and I went home, and that was it. So this is 2 years later, 2013, around the same month, almost exact. And I haven't played a Bon Jovi note in 2 years. I haven't sang a Bon Jovi lyric in 2 years. Because, when you do something like that, you go out and people are like, hey, can you play some Bon Jovi songs? And I'm like, I just played a bunch of Bon Jovi songs with Bon Jovi. Why would I let this go on YouTube with a cover band and a dive? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
So I have a respect for the band. I have a respect for the fans. I have respect for Richie Sambora, man. He co-wrote some of the best rock songs of my youth. So getting the call, it wasn't like, put me in, coach. It was more like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. And even John was like, hey, not only do I need you to play tonight, but we just put out a new record and you have to learn 3 new songs for the show. And I was like, buddy, you probably don't know a lot, but no, I can't. I'm going to spend the flight revisiting what I already knew 2 years ago for the show tonight. And then he goes, okay, that's cool. Just learn 3 new songs for tomorrow in Edmonton. And, that's how that machine goes, right?
And of course, if you screw up in Edmonton, nobody notices. I'm kidding.
Funny.
I'm kidding. We love Edmonton, except the Oilers.
So,
but
right. But the cool. Well, I didn't make the Calgary show because I got to the plane. At the time, I was working with Howard Benson on Scott Stapp's solo record. So I had recorded 6 songs, and then I had to disappear. So they had to get somebody else to finish the record. But I was on a plane, and my tech ran into Howard's studio to grab all my guitars and bring them to the plane. And then they say, hey, the plane's not working. We're going to switch planes. It's going to take an hour. And then that took an hour. And then they go, hey, did they tell you that this plane is slower than the last plane? And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, the other plane would have got you there in 2.5 hours. This is going to take you 3.5. You'll probably miss the show. And I'm like, that's okay. That's fine. That's good. And then, so I arrived. They're saying thank you, good night. And then I had the night to continue preparing. And then when I showed up at soundcheck in Edmonton, then it was like, John's like, what do you need to run? Let's do it right now. And then that was it. It's the end of the fray.
And right to a sold out arena. Let me get off of Bon Jovi for a second here. Let's go to Edge of Excess, the Triumph record, back in when was
oh
that?
My Lord,
92. You know. So let's look at this. You come into. I'm gonna just go back to Bon Jovi for a second. You replace Richie Sambora, which a lot of people credit as being.
Okay, well, let's say. Hold on, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but replace is a hard word for me. You know what I mean?
Substitute?
Like for the first bunch, yeah, it's a sub, fill in, that kind of thing. It later, it's still weird because later when I see my face on the shirt on the last 2 tours, it's kind of like, oh, right, that's me. So, but it's a weird word. I know what you're saying, but let me finish your question. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Yeah, and by the way, we'll talk about being in the pictures before, because Hugh McDonald, who's absolutely essential to Bon Jovi for years, when they did pictures, they left him out, and then in the last couple of years, you've all started appearing, and it's been like, okay, now they're saying this is the band. And anyway, that's how I perceive it, maybe wrongly, but all right. Edge of Excess. What was I going to say? Michael Levine and Gil Moore, of course, say, we're going to make a record. And the fans go, great, but Rick has left. And, Rick Emmett is one of Canada's most revered guitarists and stuff. And they say, okay, we're going to bring in, and I mean this respectfully, but a rookie, because you were back then, it was very much, beginning of your career. What was that like, and what was the pressure? Because you're not just stepping into, and I mean no disrespect, but you're not just stepping into Honeymoon Suite, or you're not just stepping into the Killer Dwarfs. You're stepping into Triumph, that have toured and done stadiums and done arenas, and you're replacing Rick Emmett, who for a lot of people is Triumph.
Right.
And that's perfectly okay to say. So what was that pressure like? What did they tell you? Mike and Gil come to you and they say, we need you to be Rick Jr., or we need you just to be Phil. Just what was that whole experience like, other than just, man, that was wacky?
Well, it was kind of wacky. It's the part of the story that is interesting is they actually asked me as I was leaving for the Blood on the Brick tour with Aldo Nova. And I sat with Gil and I said, look, I just committed to touring for the next year with Aldo Nova. And Gil said, well, if we don't find a guy, it's yours when you get back. And I mean, it's one of those things, because I was touring with Canadian band Frozen Ghost before that. And I met Mike Levine at a Q107 broadcast. Remember Q107 in Toronto?
I do.
We met at
I think Kim Mitchell had a show there for a while, or still does, a show?
He did.
Right.
So I was talking to Mike, and I'm like, Mike, how's it going? I'm Phil. He goes, yeah, I know who you are. And I'm like, well, nice to meet you. How's it going looking for a new guitar player? He goes, well, every time we ask around, people always bring you up. So we should talk. It was kind of like that. And then, and the funny thing is I was like, wow. So I'm doing Frozen Ghost, and then I do Aldo Nova, and then I'm in the throes of recording a Triumph record. And so, they have a thing. So my thing isn't really a Triumph thing out of the gate. it has to be molded by me. And, you know, Mike was producing. So he could, you know, he would come in and he goes, wow, that's pretty crazy. That's good, but it's not really Triumph. So then I would remold into a different Phil X to fill that spot. And I think that's a lot of how it goes. I even tell people in Bon Jovi, I don't go Phil X. I go because there's Richie on the left and me on the right, and this guy in the middle who I have yet to name in the middle shows up and delivers the goods every night.
Well, he can be Phil Y. But all right, jokes aside, we did mention Calico Cooper and Alice Cooper and all that just before. You did play on Brutal Planet, which is, I guess, Alice's foray into sort of a dark heavy metal, because I don't consider Alice to be heavy metal, but you are a session musician on that. So what does that mean in the context? Does it mean you played half a note on one song and you got a credit? Or does it mean that from Brutal Planet all the way down to Can't Sleep, Clowns Will Eat Me, you are in there somewhere? Are you on all 12 tracks, or are you just, hey, I played on Gimme a little bit? What's the story with the Alice Cooper Brutal Planet thing?
That was exciting because it was funny because I actually didn't meet Alice until last year, because he wasn't around. Bob Marlette was the producer. And basically, so when Rob Zombie gives your number to Alice Cooper calls his producer and says, Rob says we should get this guy on our new record. And the producer's like, never heard of him, but you're the boss, so I'll call him in to, you know, maybe play on a couple of things. But again, when you deliver, the producer goes, holy shit, can you come back Friday? I got another 9 songs to play on. So that's anything that you hear that is from the blue. I can't recall the titles of the songs, but there's one that almost has some blues licks in it, and there's the heavy, overdubby, quirky stuff is me on that whole record.
Well, so you're all the way through. That's interesting because, you know, at the time they still have Ryan Roxy, but so yeah. You're guitarist number 2 on the entire thing. That's actually very cool because that is a much revered album among Cooper fans. As, hey, that was a nice turn for Alice. So that's great to hear. Recently you were
Bob Marlette actually played all the rhythm guitars on it.
Oh, really?
The producer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in fact, that's how he tried to get me. He tried to get me to cower in the corner maybe. So he could send me home.
That's
so
funny.
He's like, hey, so I played all the rhythm guitars on the bass. I need some pixie dust. Go. And he just pressed record. And I heard this riff, and it was Brutal Planet, the song. And I just went into this crazy thing for the intro. And he goes, wow, that was great. Double it. So it was kind of like that.
Wow, that is awesome. And I know we're running. We're going to run short on time, so I'm going to move around a little bit more. Earlier this year, you got to play and sing with ULI John Roth and Rudolf Schenker and the drummer. I'm forgetting the drummer's name. Rudy Leonard.
Rudy Leonard.
And a couple of months ago, or about a month ago, I was sitting with Uli on his bus discussing you and this, and he had so many great things to say about you, about how you handled the songs and how he heard about you and saw you and had to fly you out. And so, you know, listen, you're a rock fan like I'm a rock fan. What's it like to be in the middle of Japan with Uli, a guitar god on one side, Rudolph, a guitar god on the other side, singing, you know, those Scorpion songs, and having those guys do a version of "Send Me an Angel"? What was that like?
It was, it's still kind of surreal. Because I have pictures in my phone that people sent me. This is me standing in between the 2 dudes, Rudy and Uli, which I was a huge fan of that lineup when I was a kid. Like, Uli was my hero when I was 16. And I had those records. I had In Trance and I had Virgin Killer. And even before it happened, you mean it's almost like getting a text from God. It's going way out there. But you haven't gone to Japan yet. You're going about your day, and you get a text from ULI Jon Roth saying, "Hey, how about singing Virgin Killer?"
I mean, really?
All.
So
I'm
it's
like,
terrific.
oh my! I'm like, I just hit him back and go, done. You know, it's amazing. So I'm out there, and not only is playing with those guys served up on a platter of incredibleness, but hanging backstage and talking to Rudy and talking to Uli, and they probably, it was a reunion for them. I don't think they've seen each other in a really long time, and they were talking, and I don't know if I like the picture of the three of us on a couch backstage laughing, or the picture on stage making music. It's like a draw. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
So for and Uli Roth, he has a very there's no poker face. He tells you exactly what he's feeling. And he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, what you played in All Along the Watchtower tonight was," and you're looking at his face going, "Oh no, it's not good." And he goes, "It was perfect." And I'm like, "Damn, dude, why you gotta string me along like that with that face?" So it was pretty awesome to be thrown into that whole thing. It was it's like Catch Your Train, man. I learned that when I was 16, and here I am singing it with the band that recorded it, minus Francis, the bass player. But it was and not only that, I think I was warming up. I was singing and coming into the dressing room, which had a corner, and as I came around the corner, Rudolph goes, "Hey, can you do that one more time?" I'm like, "Do one more time?" He's sing Catch Your Train coming into the dressing room so I can film it and send it to Klaus. He'll totally love it. I'm like, it's every moment was like, oh man, how am I going to remember all this stuff? I need to document. I need to find a film crew to follow me wherever I go if this is the stuff that's going to happen.
Oh, and I loved it. I've watched those YouTube videos many times because they're just great performances. And we will finish on this. You had a chance, of course, to put your stamp on This House Is Not For Sale, the first Bon Jovi album, I guess, to officially have you. Great album, by the way. Man, the roller coaster, knockout, reunion. I mean, just some great stuff, and some of the bonus tracks, if you want. We Don't Run, Color Me In. I just love that stuff. What was it like to be on that? And then just quickly finish off with, tell me a little bit about what's going on with the new album. We see a lot of stuff on Instagram. You're in Nashville with John Shanks, and you're flying in and out of all these different places.
Yes.
Just quickly tell me about that first experience and the next experience.
This House Is Not For Sale was more of a last minute thought. Like John, I think the record was pretty much recorded, and then John Bon Jovi decided that, okay, a rock band can't be a singer, a drummer, and a keyboard player. So let's get Phil and Hugh in the photos, in the videos, on the jacket, on the album jacket, all that stuff. But if we're going to do that, we need to get Phil to New York pronto and get him on at least 4 songs. So that's what happened there, which was, the first time in the studio. It was like, wow, this is, and then, he kind of let me loose. I was really proud of a few of the things that I did. There was one song called Born Again Tomorrow, where he goes, I want you to rip. So I got to rip, which was awesome. And then on this current record, this is the first record where I'm actually involved from the ground up. We're laying down beds in Nashville for about 10 or 11 days. And now we're doing overdubs. And there might be more songs recorded for the record as well. But this is the first time doing this, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and let me tell you, tracking down all the different bonus tracks and stuff was quite an adventure, but I managed to get it done. So when do you see the next album coming out, do you think? Is that something that we're looking at maybe third or fourth quarter this year, or is it a 2020 release?
I'm going to say yes.
Whatever works, works.
Know.
You don't know.
Whatever works for the band. Whatever is, John has a plan. I've never seen a man with a plan so focused. It's like he knows what's going to happen. And sometimes I'm the last to find out. It's like, everybody, fans are like, hey, I can't wait to see you in Rock in Rio. I'm like, wait, that was 2017. No, you're doing it again this year. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me know.
It's working. And listen, I will admittedly say I love Richie Sambora, but I love you in Bon Jovi as well. The band to me is the band's you're doing as great as last time you were in Montreal, there was 2 shows. I went to both. And if you had done 4 shows, I would have gone to all 4.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and we'll remind.
Actually, the second Montreal show was probably my favorite. I think it feels like even when you tour for like 2 or 3 months, it feels like when you get to the end, you finally got your stride. And we rocked that last show at Montreal. It was amazing. I loved it.
I will fully agree. And what I appreciate with Bon Jovi in general is that when they do multiple stands or multiple nights in a city, you don't get a cookie cutter 15-song set list and, hey, you came yesterday? Well, hello, here we do it again, Groundhog Day. You guys actually have audibles on the set list that you'll pull in and throw in because John's feeling it, or you'll change at least 4 or 5 songs. So if you go, yes, of course, you'll get Living on a Prayer. And yes, of course, you'll get You Give Love a Bad Name. But if you didn't get those, you'd be upset anyway. But you give them different stuff.
Yeah,
and that's what's great. It's just nice. You, Metallica, Pearl Jam are bands where you can see 5 shows in a row and still somehow manage to see 30 different songs or something like that. And it's kudos to all the musicians, to the Eddie Vedders of this world and the John Bon Jovis and the Larses. You got to keep it interesting for fans, You
really do, because there's people who go to 10, 20, 30, 100 shows, and it's nice to switch it up. But I got to add, before we go, someone asked me on the plane the other day if I get tired of playing Living on a Prayer, and I have to say I still get goosebumps. But I haven't been there for 30 years like everybody else.
Well, no, true. But you know what? The other thing with Bon Jovi is that, yes, they'll play Living on a Prayer every single show for the last 30 years. But if you listen to the different live versions, there's always a little something different, whether it's a little faster or a little slower, or John adds a little speech in the middle of it. Bon Jovi has never been cookie cutter, and that is a great compliment to what John and Tico and David and Phil and Richie and Huey and Alec and everybody who stepped into that band, Bobby Bendiere, you've managed to make it unique. I mean, for years they were doing a very slow version of Runaway. It's not, oh, here are 15 songs, let's do this for the next 20 years. And so
right.
Kudos to you. And of course, Phil X and the Drills, Stupid Good Looking Things, Volume 1 out now, Volume 2 out soon, Volume 3 hopefully even sooner. Phil, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And of course, keep all the Canadian guys going. And we, of course, didn't talk about some of the stuff you did with Our Lady Peace and Avril Lavigne. But hey, as we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup. Absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome, man. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's do another one soon. You've got something else to come out. Let's keep doing these. I like it.
Let's do it.
Merci, monsieur. Cheers.
Take care, brother.
Bye-bye now. Cheers.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.
And a very big thank you to Phil X of Bon Jovi. It has occurred to me that in my career, I've only interviewed 2 members of Bon Jovi, one being Richie Sambora back in 2018, and the other being Phil X. So I have interviewed an original guitarist and the guy who has come in and held the fort remarkably. So just interesting. Now, back in the day when I used to write for this thing called Brave Words magazine, there was an interview that appeared with Richie and John, penned by Mitch Lafon. And here is what's some of the inside trickery of the business. What the record companies would do at the time. They did it with Phil Collins with me and John Bon Jovi. And so they would provide you with a CD with 20 tracks or 10 tracks, whatever, which were just answers. And they would then give you a cheat sheet. So they would give you the questions on a paper. And so what you would do is you would end up on the radio and you'd say, hey, we are welcoming John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora. They've got a new album out called, Crush, whatever. And then you would hit track 1 and you'd hear, hey, man, yeah, we're glad to be here. It's a great thing. And anyway, so what I did, because at the time it was a print medium for me, it wasn't radio, I took this thing and I transcribed the answers as requested. I was asked to transcribe the questions. And so we turned it in. So if you look back into the old issues of this Brave Words magazine, you will see, I'm trying to think when it was, must have been 2000, 2004, something like that. You'll see this interview that appears. Mitch Lafon talks to Richie Sambora and John Bon Jovi, and oh well, you got an interview with the guys, and way to go. But no, I did not get an interview with the guys. I had gone out to the trying to think what it was. I guess at the time it might have been called the Corel Center in Ottawa, the arena where the Ottawa Senators play. I think it was the Corel Center back then. And there was a Bon Jovi show, and I met the Universal rep, and she handed me the CD, and I went home and I diligently transcribed it, and that was my first interview. So it's actually nice to get the actual members on the phone to discuss what's going on. Anyhow, let us move on to our second guest of the day. It is Billy Rowe, and I will start off by saying this. Billy Rowe of Jetboy, and I will start off by saying a very, very big thank you to Billy. The whole thing with Phil X was courtesy of Billy. Billy and Phil know each other, and we were talking about doing this interview, and he was like, you should talk to Phil. He's got this new EP, and it would be great. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't know how to reach him. And he said, well, here's his number, just text him, and I'll tell him that to expect the text. And then, as you heard in the first part, it went back and forth for a couple of months. Anyway, I kept telling Billy, listen, I'll get this interview out. I want to pair it with Phil X so that, the Bon Jovi fans that listen will maybe hopefully stay tuned in and listen to what Billy has to say. But their new album, which came out earlier this year, I believe it was in January, if I'm not mistaken, is called Born to Fly. It is a very, very honest rock and roll record. So if you like that style, go pick it up. And if you don't, go pick it up anyway and learn to discover this style and learn to discover the music and support Billy and Jetboy. And of course, like I said also at the beginning of the show, every year I go to this festival in Columbia, Maryland called the M3 Festival. It is absolutely the greatest time you will ever have. You've got all these bands from the 80s, early 90s, whatever you want to call it, hair metal, glam rock, pure rock, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter as long as you buy a ticket and go to the show. The guys, Eric Baker and the guys who throw this festival together, they just throw one hell of a rock and roll party. So anyway, you got to check it out. Anyway, listen, enough me. I know it's my show, but there's too much me. Well, at least too much me today because my voice is walking away. My voice is on strike, but I'm here and I'm surviving. But less complaints. Here is from Jetboy, the one, the only, and you know what? I'm going to add in the mighty Billy Rowe. We are speaking with Billy Rowe of Jetboy. The new album is Born to Fly. And, Billy, first of all, welcome. But I've got to start off by saying this. I listened to the album and I saw that video, and and you're gonna get annoyed at this. I wasn't expecting much. I was like, oh, okay, Jetboy, I remember them from back in the day, because in Canada we didn't see much of you. And then I listened to it and right. I went, holy fuck, man, this is sorry for the language, but this is like a real rock record. This is job well done, boys. So I'm going to start off with what sounded like not a compliment, but really a compliment. The album is really, really well put together. It is a fun rock album, and it's nice to see a band that's not afraid to just be who they are and just have some fun in 2019.
Right. Well, that's great. That was our, that was our goal from the get-go, to do a Jetboy record and a good, fun rock and roll record. But I also get it where there's a lot of people who are going to be like, Jetboy, I don't really, we were part leaders of that pack back in the 80s of GNR Poison, LA Guns and all that. But we didn't hit the success. And, under the first record, I'll admit that we were stirred music industry-wise, different directions. I never thought the record really came across the way the band really was live. I would say the second album was more that. So for people to be skeptical by hearing the name and going like, I'll check it out, but whatever, not having big hopes, in a lot of ways, it's kind of cool that they think that way now. And then they put it on and go like, whoa, shit, this is a friggin' great record, and that's pretty awesome,
Yeah.
So.
Well, you proved me wrong. So good. That's the way it should be. I want to be proven wrong, especially when it comes to music. So, no, but jokes aside and that aside, 'cause I don't want to sound negative. But do talk to me about the process of getting this one out, because you haven't had a new album or new music. I mean, you've had collections and live, but you haven't really done writing and putting together new songs in 20 years, 25 years. What was the decision?
Long time. Well,
Yeah. So, what was the make some more noise? No, that's a compilation, wasn't it?
a lot of those are compilations, and we did an EP in 2010. Off Your Rocker had 3 new songs on it. It didn't really see too much, but we haven't recorded a full length album since. The last one was the second album, Damnation. That was 1990. So it's been 28 years since we've done a full length, and it really happened by just being approached by Frontiers through our booking agent. Nick over at the label asked Chuck over at Artists Worldwide, "Hey, I see you have Jetboy on your roster. It's like, you think they have a new album in them?" And he asked me, and I asked Nick and Fern, and we said, "Hell yeah, let's do it." And so all this whole process with this record was super organic. It was no hopes to do a record. We were just doing shows and trying to build the band back up that way. Talked about writing some songs and maybe doing something, but everything came so just natural and just like with no hope or anything, that I think that's a big part of why it came out the way it is, because we got approached. We said, all right, let's write a record. And we just kind of picked up where we left off. But then we injected those 28 years of what each of us have grown, how each of us have grown as a musician and writer and stuff. So I think that's how Born to Fly pretty much came together.
Yeah. And, I think if you look back in almost any band's catalogs, the first album, the second album, there's an innocence and there's a sound, and then by the time you get to the third and fourth, the record company starts telling them to write singles, and they start forcing it. And I think that's why Born to Fly works, because it really is just like, oh, all right, there's no pressure. Let's just get in here and do the best we can. So what is now the plan, though, moving forward? I mean, obviously, you've got Chuck and you've got a booking agent, so you're doing live shows, but is it one and done? Or do you go back to Frontiers in 2020 and say, all right, you got our juices flowing, let's do this again? Is it one and done or beginning of something new?
We want it to be the beginning of something new. I think we're all just completely inspired, and we finished this record. I mean, once we got writing this record, we were like, kind of a little like, oh shit, we got to write a record now. We're like going kind of scrambling, but all this material is brand new. And it was the funnest record to write and record. And, I'm already writing ideas for another record. We want to keep going. I mean, this just proves to us that we can keep going, and we still have some gas in the tank to play rock and roll.
And keep it going. Why not? So,
Yeah.
The other thing that I find amazing after all these years is that you've got Mickey, you've got Fernie, so you've got three out of the five, if you want to say. But talk to me a little bit about Eric Stacey. He is somebody who has spent time in the scene, did Faster Pussycat, a whole bunch of other stuff. What does he bring? Because you had Sammy Yaffa in there. What does Eric bring to you? Does he bring you sort of that sleazy, faster pussycat kind of rock? Does he just sort of plug in and play the parts? Like, what's his role for this?
Well, I thought it was a perfect match for, especially doing this record and all that. Eric and I are very similar. I mean, we've all grown up on the same music, but Eric and I can go down rabbit holes of like deep track stuff on, Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare and getting into bands like Japan and all that. And just like, well, we all could get into that stuff. Everybody in the band, making Fern as well. But Eric's a great bass player, and he's a huge fan of all these bands that we grew up with, and even, like I say, even deep ones like the Babies and, like I mentioned to you, Nick Gilder and stuff like that. So I think having someone like that in the process of doing a record is huge, because you just have more to offer, since you're just so well-rounded of a listener is really what makes you more well-rounded as a player. So I agree. He played some great stuff on the record,
Now, folks just heard you say Nick Gilder, and of course, we were talking about Canadian bands before we got the tape rolling. So let's go down that road a bit real quick. We'll do that, and then we'll do the Kiss stuff. And then you mentioned Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare. It is easily the best Alice Cooper album, or at least the best solo album, but that is brilliance. But Talk to me about these Canadian bands that you like, because if I throw a band like Honeymoon Suite out there, or Killer Dwarves, or Loverboy, are those bands that affected you? Because up here, of course, we were force-fed it on radio and TV. How did you discover it?
I don't know. I grew up in San Francisco. I grew up in I was a huge part of that whole, the metal scene and all that happened with Metallica and Exodus. We were all these bands, Death Angel. We were all young and friends and played the scene. And that's kind of when Jetboy started. But I was, as a kid, I was super into the import section when I got turned on to like the whole British, new wave of British heavy metal stuff. And so I would search import bins, and a lot of times it was also going to shows in the Bay Area. We had Dan the Greens and Bill Graham Presents, always great shows. So I think I saw Cheap Trick and Pat Travers. I want to say either Coney Hatch opened, or I don't know, but anyway, I saw Coney Hatch, and then I just got into it. I was a music fan and anything new, so I got into all that stuff. Loverboy, of course, blew up big. And Nick Gilder was he blew up big with Hot Child in the City, but I got all those records. Him and James McCall, the guitar player, I think are the two of my favorite songwriters from that era, just hands down. Those records are just phenomenal records, and not just City Nights, you know Who You Are, and, just the Frequency, just like awesome records. And I just, I got deep into that, April Wine, and you say Bryan Adams and all that. I love all that stuff, big time. I was super into it.
Let me ask you for sort of the American perspective on Canadian music. Because, when I sit here and you can say the British invasion, you can say the new wave of British heavy metal, and you go, yeah, there's a sound, Tigers of Pantang and stuff, there's a sound. And when you say, when you say Sunset Strip, you think Motley Crue, and you think Jetboy, and you think Pretty Boy Floyd and Poison. You go, there's a sound. I've never considered Canadian music to necessarily have a sound, but maybe it's because it's just too close, and you can't be objective. Is there a Canadian sound, and if so, how would you describe it?
I guess for me, I guess it's different for me because I know they're Canadian bands. Maybe I wasn't so in tune. Oh, these bands are from Canada, when I was a kid, but I put it all together later. But there was a sense of a very good rock and roll riffy element to all those bands. But there was a huge pop and super catchy and melodic element, which I think is you put those two together. With a lot of the Canadian bands, I think that's really what they delivered for me. I mean, bands like I said, Nick Gilder and Prism and Loverboy, Bryan Adams, they just had these infectious riffs and choruses and hooks. And they're some of my most influential songwriters. We had Cheap Trick in America for me as a kid, the ultimate songwriter and pop hooky stuff with great riffs. But in Canada, you guys had quite a bit,
Yeah. So, all right, let me ask you about this, because you mentioned also before we started that you were listening to the interview that I had done with Tom Werman, and of course, Tom is one of the greatest producers, and all the bands that bitch and moan. You know what? Give back the money if you're not happy with what Tom did. But I also had Jim Vallance on recently, and he's a great songwriter, and he gave us the stories, and he of course he wrote with Bryan Adams. For you, what's sort of your secret sauce when it comes to writing? Is there a process? Is it just you wake up and you write down whatever's in the top of your head? Do you stress over it for a year? How does Jetboy, and specifically you, come up with a new song?
Well, in the old days, it was very much I'd come up with a riff, and then Fern would come up with a riff and bounce off it, and Mick would write the lyrics and the melodies, which Mick still, with Jetboy, writes all the melodies and the lyrics and all that. But nowadays, I got very into songwriters, and I got very into dissecting songs and producers, and I got the Logic program, and I'm very into recording, so that was a huge part of this record. So I'll sit down with a riff, and I try to just find something that's catchy musically, that's going to have that hook and riffy, and just have something that you go like, yeah, that feels good, and then just build off of that. And then structure-wise, I'm a less is more person. I like simplicity. I like if you can just hook somebody in with something super simple and infectious. That is, like, to me, the hardest thing to do with songwriting. So I'll sit down, I'll have a riff, and I'll play it put a drum beat down and play it for a little while, and then I just see what kind of spits out of my hands after that, and see what comes next, and I start just compiling it and arranging it, and I passionately get super into it. I could do that all day long.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you this, and we're going to refer to Prism and Jim Vallance, the writer. When I was interviewing him, he said the most important thing in songwriting is the title, because when you get to the chorus, you want that title. When you hear Highway to Hell, you know the song is called Highway to Hell. And then he said Drops of Jupiter. They never even say the words Drops of Jupiter, and they had to. Is it important that the song or the lyric is easily identifiable, and that the song title and the chorus, when you hear, whatever, Born to Be My Baby, You Give Love a Bad Name, how important is title for you?
Well, I was never I'm not a huge lyricist writer. I have some of my own stuff I have dabbled into, but I'll agree with him. It is important. If you can come up with something that is just like, a super wowed title where you're like, man, that's just like, it's a hook on its own by just saying it, that's even just more money for you on putting it into the song. And that's hard as hell to do. That's a challenge, I would love to challenge myself with that more. I would love to sit and write with other people and be challenged those things right there to come up with something, because you just grow from it.
I'll have to hook you up with Jim. He's so incredibly nice. But the other thing that I know that you're very much into is, like me, is a good old Kiss. You wanted the best, you got the best. They are currently on the end of the road tour. What do you feel about that? Because you've also got Ozzy out there who did a farewell tour, but it's not really a farewell tour. He just says Motley Crue did that. What's sort of your take on bands that call it a day? Should the music not just sort of go on forever?
Well, I guess the music will go on forever as we listen to it, and on CD, vinyl, or 8-track, or MP3. But as in playing live, I don't know. I guess everybody kind of sees their end of the road for when they're ready to not do it anymore. I think with Kiss, maybe they're just gonna. I'm assuming musically, individually, they're going to do something, that I would think, but maybe they just feel it's time to hang it up with that. I don't know. I guess time will tell with this tour. A lot of these other bands have put it to rest, but Motley Crue's still kind of working as a business, and they've got the movie coming out, and I know they recorded some songs, so maybe it's just a live thing, to not tour anymore. I don't know. So. And I'm not in those shoes to really know what it feels like. So, know.
So,
it's like AC/DC.
Let me go with Kiss again. Where do you find yourself being a fan of? Are you classic era Kiss, or are you non-makeup era makeup Kiss? Because yesterday, and I know this is a gratuitous name drop, but I was talking to Ron Nevison yesterday, and of course he has recorded Crazy Crazy Nights. Are you the Crazy Nights guy, or are you the sort of rock and roll over guy?
Well, I'm 52, and I saw Kiss in '77 with Cheap Trick on the day Elvis died. So I'm old school. I was in the Army in 1976. I still have my kit. I still have my newsletters and my program when I saw him. So I'm, I have to be the old school, because that's where it all came from for me. I got Kiss Alive in '75, and it was all over from then. But I moved along. I wasn't as heavily into them when Dynasty and Unmasked came out. I think it was probably around Creatures where I kind of got pulled back in a little bit. I was always still a fan, but I loved Lick It Up. I loved Animalized. I was into Asylum. I was not as heavy into them as I was maybe, Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. Crazy Nights I did not get when it came out, but I'm a pop song guy, so the song Crazy Nights I think is great. There's other songs on that album that I've heard as of recently, because Bruce Kulick's been doing his band with his brother, and they played a couple songs, and I'm like, what's that one? And it was off of Crazy Nights, and it's just a pop hooky tune. And of course, Ron Nevison, I mean, I could talk about that guy from UFO to the Babies, some of the greatest stuff ever. I mean, that guy's a phenomenal producer. But so
yeah, I'm
at this point of my life. Oh, he's great. At this point with Kiss, I'm a fan of all of it. I hold the old stuff, the classic stuff, I hold closer to my heart and just what I'm really into. But I could put on all those records and dig it. I loved Sonic Boom. I loved Psycho Circus and Monster. I thought there were some strong songs on all those. And it's Kiss. I can't just drop a band that I loved so much as a kid, and
right. Yeah, you see, that's a great point, because and I'm gonna rant here for a second, but I see a lot of fans, especially online, and they've been picking on Ozzy, and they've been picking on Dokken, and they've been picking on Kiss, and they've been picking. They just seem to be picking on all these bands, and I'm going to compare it this way. You look at a football player, whether it's a Roger Staubach or a Terry Bradshaw, or and they give you maybe 7 years of entertainment, maybe 10 years for some of the superstars, and then they disappear, and you have this memory of, remember back in the day when Terry Bradshaw and and you just revere it. And then you look at a band like Kiss that has been around for 40 years, creating 40 years of memories, 40 years of music, 40 years of your life. And instead of saying thank you or, oh, that's so great, we go, ugh, look what they're doing. Yeah. And I don't get it. I mean, isn't that awful what some fans do? Instead of saying thank you, it's like, whoa, they can't sing. Oh, shut up. Just be thankful that they gave you 40 years.
Yeah. I'm that way with, there's a lot, you hear that with Aerosmith and AC/DC and, it's
all of them.
All of them, and I've bought all those bands mentioned there. I've always bought all the records every time they come out. There's still stuff on all those records I still love, and I loved when I heard it. And I just love music, and I could sit down and put on Kiss Destroyer. I could put on, Lick It Up, and I could put on Toys in the Attic. I can go put on Pump, and I could turn around and I can go put on Neil Sedaka, and I love it.
Right. As you should. So, all right.
That's how I am.
Since we were talking about Ron Nevison, let's go. Let's make you pick here. Kiss Alive or Strangers in the Night?
Oh man, that's hard as hell. I mean, that's
the ultimate pick. That's the ultimate pick right there. I mean, I could throw in Scorpion's Tokyo Tapes if we really want to get nasty.
Oh, I mean, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, there's so many live ones you could put in. I mean, maybe for Kiss Alive, it's because it was the first Kiss record I got, and it was the first live record I got, and I think it would be the first record that exposed me to that energy. And I think that's a huge part of what got me into music, is that live energy. As much as maybe it's not as live as they say it is, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Awesome. It's a great freaking record.
It's great memories.
I mean, I would go with Kiss Alive, great memories for sure.
So let me ask you about that. Seeing Kiss with Cheap Trick in '77, and yes, I'm completely and utterly jealous because I only saw them in '79. But when you sort of picked up the instrument and you said, to the family, I'm going to go be a rock star, I'm going to go to Sunset Strip, or I'm going to go, what was the reaction? Was it one of support, or was it one of like, oh no, the hell you are? What was the sort of the family situation in terms of you wanting to be a musician?
It was full supportive. I mean, my dad took me to that Kiss show with two other friends of mine, and he took me to my first show with those same friends, which was A Day on the Green, which was the Eagles and Steve Miller, Hart, Atlantic Rhythm Section, and Foreigner. And then after that, I went to tons of shows, and it was my life and my friends and my neighborhood and school. That's what it was. It was, mid to late 70s rolling into 80, and it was all about going to see shows and these big concerts. And they were super supportive. They were supportive when I got into the music and really never flinched. They just, if you love doing that, especially when it got more professional and they saw stuff happening, it was like, wow, it's really something's kind of happening for him, So it was super supportive. I never had to fight anything when it came to wanting to play music and everything.
And
yeah,
so,
which I'm pretty lucky.
How important is the live show to Jetboy?
I think a live show for all bands, especially, with Jetboy is huge, to come across live with, to inspire and just like infect the crowd with just having a great time and just being in the moment of a fun rock and roll show is what it's all about. I mean, that's what I want when I go see a band, where you just are in that moment and everything else in your head is gone, and you're just in that moment of this band just giving you everything you love about rock and roll, and just you forget every other problem or whatever it may be in your life you don't want to think about. And I think that's a total gift, and if you're a band that can give that to other people, that's huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's remind the folks, of course, that Jetboy Born to Fly is out now. It is absolutely spectacular. It is a fun, what dirty rock and roll do we want to call it, or just plain old rock and roll? It's just a fun record. I mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that all fits in it. It's dirty. It's rock and roll. It's fun. It's it's all that. Great.
Yeah. So, Billy, an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Yeah, that was great. I could go on for hours on all this stuff.
Yeah, we could talk Kiss and stuff, but I think importantly, we need to get Jetboy up to Canada, and we need to find you a bill with like Helix or Killer Dwarves or Honeymoon Suite, and so exactly. you can play the show, but also then go in the audience and be the fan for a little bit. That would be ideal.
I would love that. I would be super into it. I'm also a big fan of the newer generation rock, is Danko Jones. I think that band is blistering.
Yeah, I recently had a chance to interview Danko, so that's fun too. So yeah, just a lot of great stuff. And there we go. And as we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Right on. Thank you. Hopefully we'll get there. I know we'll get there eventually. That's the goal with this record, is to get out there and hit as many stages as we can, and just play as much as possible, and just get this band to another level that I think we should have been at a long time ago. But better late than never. Better late than never.
And of course, you can tell Chuck to phone the Brass Monkey and the Piranha Club in Ottawa and Montreal and get you up here. He deals with them all the time, so let's get it done.
That sounds like a plan. And then we can go out to dinner and talk about all these insane rock bands that we love and all the deep, geeky stuff that I can go on forever about too.
And then we can talk about all the stuff that we can't talk about on air, because there's secrets. Got to keep those secrets to the inner circle. There you go.
Right.
There you go. Thank you.
This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.